My dad is the most wanted criminal. Hi, my name is Abigail, and this is my story. I exited school, class still ringing in my ear. I didn't really retain much from the lesson, though. The gossip and chatter from my classmates kept me from really paying attention to what the teacher was trying to say. Did you hear? The famous criminal just hacked into more of the local government systems, a guy with curly hair said, his face astounded. No way, that's crazy, another guy said, both of them fist bumping under their desks as if they were really impressed by this feat of some criminal. I really wasn't much for the news. A lot of it was really scary and I didn't really pay much mind to it. But this criminal gained world renown, hacking into big systems, stealing money, and generally becoming a big issue to big corporations and governments. It got so bad, in fact, that schools started to regulate our chatter on it, fearing the criminal might inspire younger generations into a more chaotic lifestyle. I, however, didn't buy into that and simply tried to live my life peacefully away from all the noise and humdrum. I headed home, walking through downtown streets, hearing passerbys talk about this criminal. I heard he's been sending all the information and money he's stolen to impoverished people, a woman says, clutching what looks like a sleeping baby in her arms. Yeah, well, he's still breaking the law. That's just not right, the man she was walking with replied, possibly her husband. As I walked by a window display of TVs and an electronics store, the flashing of the news caught my attention, and a news reporter was talking about the latest development. His face was worn out, as if having to cover this news story was getting loathsome. Breaking news, he said, gripping his script. The criminal labeled the cyber rogue has just gotten his way into the mainframe of the biggest bank in the country, sending big corporations into a frenzy to attain their assets and cause massive havoc at local ATMs. I sighed and continued walking, listening to this criminal attain more and more fame through almost errant attacks on people's lives. I climbed the apartment stairs, hearing more and more people talk about this criminal, some labeling him a vigilante who's bringing down big corporations and returning wealth to the everyday citizen, others calling him a menace who's causing mass chaos and havoc across a national or even international scale. But a buzzing question kept circulating, entering and exiting people's lips like a spreading infection. Who was this cyber rogue and why was he doing what he did? I reached our apartment where me and my dad live. I opened the door to find him laying on the couch, worn from a heavy day of work. I couldn't help but smile and tease him, closing the door as gently as I could. I crept up to him slowly and tackled him with a big hug, causing him to groan under my weight. Ow, he yelled, but a smile drew on his face as he wrapped his arms around me. You got me, he said, chuckling. I got you, Dad, I said in reply, giggling to myself. Me and Dad hugged for a little bit and then sat up, him giving me a pet on the head as we started to talk about our day. He spoke first, complaining about his working conditions and how his manager worked him ragged. Why don't you just find a better job, Dad? I asked, concern for his health being prevalent on my face. He simply shook his head. Not many people would take a washed-up computer engineer like me. We're lucky that where I work took me when they did. We'd be broke otherwise. I pouted. Still, don't get yourself sick, mister. He raised his hands in surrender and teasingly said, Yes, ma'am. We both chuckled and continued talking. I explained to my dad how my day went, the classes being the usual boring drawl, and the heavy talk about this criminal who was putting the world upside down. He coughed at the mention of this, and I turned to him even more worried than before. You sure you're okay? I asked. He simply nodded. Just a little tired is all, Abby. I'll be right as rain tomorrow, he replied, standing up and stretching. Why don't we make some food, eh? He said, and stood up and nodded. I'll cover cooking. It's fine, Dad. He simply chuckled, a warm smile growing on his face. You remind me so much of your mother. We cooked together, our dinner, a delicious meal that left us both full, and we sat together in the early evening, relaxing after our heavy days of work and school. "Did that hit the spot?" he asked, turning the TV onto the news. "You bet it did." I started to speak, but the news began to talk, and I was surprised by what it said. "Breaking news! It seems a leak in the Cyber Rogue's defenses has drawn him into the light. Police are scrambling on the new information to apprehend this criminal and put him to justice." The newscaster seemed ecstatic at the information that he'd conveyed, his smile almost too wide. I looked at Dad. "Dang, Dad, they finally caught him!" But his expression wasn't what I'd expected. He seemed uncharacteristically cold, almost as if he had dreaded hearing that news. Before I could ask, he suddenly took my shoulders. "Whatever I did, it wasn't for any bad reason. Do you understand, Abby? Your mother wanted my help, and I love her so much I couldn't refuse. We just wanted to help people. But his voice got cut off as the front door burst open, policemen in SWAT gear yelling out, "Police, put your hands in the air!" Followed by the glare of flashlights, the clicking of firearms, and the heavy footsteps of law enforcement. I instinctively stood up and raised my hands and saw Dad doing likewise. Fear filling my brain as I looked to my dad for answers, but his expression surprised me. He looked resigned, like he knew this day would come. They pressed him into the rug, causing me to yell and scream and rush to his side, but before I could reach him, a policeman stopped me, grabbing me, and held me back. "Stop! I'm not resisting! Don't hurt her!" Dad yelled, shocking me as I tried to reach him, and so the police merely held me still as he was handcuffed and brought to his feet. "You are under arrest, Cyber Rogue," the police snarled, dragging him away out of the apartment. I was so confused. My head swam with fear, rage, and confusion as to why my dad was being arrested. And when my dad left the apartment, the policeman who held me back looked at me. His expression was steely. "Do you know what your father did? Why he's being arrested?" he asked, clearly probing me. I simply shook my head, too stunned to really process what was going on. He seemed satisfied with this answer, and let me go, urging me to follow him. The next few minutes were a blur. I didn't know what happened in the cop car or how long it was, but when my consciousness came to, I was sitting in front of a chair, facing what looked like a glass panel, with Dad on the other side, the two of us separated by a glass window and large, heavy cement cubicles. "Dad?" I asked, so lost as to what happened. But Dad simply shook his head. "I did this, Abby. I know what I did was wrong. You don't need to deny it. I won't hide it anymore." My senses focused, and I looked at him in surprise and horror. "You're Cyber Rogue? That famous criminal who's taken the news by storm and hacked into so many big places, he's become a big problem?" He looked me square in the face, his expression cold and accepting of his face, but I could tell in his eyes he held remorse. Yet I couldn't accept it, rage filling in my chest. Why? Why would you do all this?" His expression didn't change, yet his words hit me harder than a bullet. "Your mom wanted to help people, and they took her from me, from us. I couldn't stand it, so I gave back. I gave people what they needed." He sighed and pressed a hand to the glass. "I know you may hate me, Abby, but I hope you'll understand and visit me in here." I could feel the resignation in his voice, as if knowing full well the gravity of what he did. I stared at his hand, my rage filling in my lungs like smoke. But in that moment, I felt the smoke dissipate, and I pressed my hand to his against the glass. "Of course, Dad, just stay safe in there. I'll stay at Auntie's while you're in there." Dad was a criminal, a world-renowned one at that, but he was still Dad, and he had his heart in the right place still. It would take some time to really accept what he did, but I understood his motivations. He was still my father, and what he did wasn't out of malice or spite. It was love. I visited him every day I could, and he seemed content to serve his time. No matter what he did, as long as he's staying true to himself, he'll always be my dad. Thank you for watching. If you liked this story, please like, comment, subscribe, and share Reese's Animation.